Come on, sweetheart. Step into the ring. Let's see if you can last 10 seconds before I drop you." The words sliced through the noise of the gym like a blade, sharp enough to freeze the clang of weights and the rhythmic thud of jump ropes. Heads turned. Gloves stopped mid-punch. Every eye shifted toward the sparring mat where the challenge had been thrown. The man who said it stood tall in his black belt uniform, chest puffed, smirk curling on his lips. His tone wasn't one of respect, it was mockery, a performance for the crowd. His voice carried the swagger of someone who thought he was untouchable. And across from him, standing quietly by the edge of the mat, was Maya Johnson. Black, mid-40s, dressed not in a gi but in a simple fitted track jacket and dark leggings. She hadn't come here to fight. She had come here to watch, to breathe, to test a gym her company had quietly invested in. But the black belt saw only a woman he thought didn't belong. "You in here taking notes?" he jeered, loud enough for the room. "Or are you just here to watch men do the real work?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter broke out among a few trainees. Others looked away, ashamed but silent. The room's air shifted. What had been routine training turned into spectacle. Maya didn't flinch. She adjusted her sleeve, eyes calm, lips pressed into a line that revealed nothing. The black belt pressed further, sensing weakness where there was none. "I'll tell you what, step in here. I'll even go easy. No chokes, no arm breaks. Just a friendly lesson so you know your place." The arrogance echoed, filling the high-ceilinged gym with something heavier than noise, contempt. Maya's stillness drew more eyes than his shouting. A young trainer paused mid-combo, gloves hanging by his side, watching the scene with unease. A woman at the water station frowned, shaking her head slowly. The gym was no longer training, it was waiting. Maya finally looked up. Her gaze met his, steady as stone. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. The silence stretched, until it wasn't silence anymore, it was weight. A weight that unsettled the challenger because it didn't break. "Cat got your tongue?" he sneered, desperate for a reaction. "Don't worry, I'll make it quick." Maya's hands remained at her sides. No tremor, no retreat. Just stillness, the kind of stillness that holds storm. And in that storm, a truth waited. He thought he was mocking a stranger. He had no idea he had just stepped into the ring with the owner of the building itself. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Maya. The gym was alive with murmurs now. Some smirked, waiting for a spectacle. Others avoided looking at her, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. On the mats, the black belt paced with the cockiness of a man who thought he'd already won a fight that hadn't even begun. Maya stood still at the edge, hands at her sides, jacket zipped halfway. She wasn't dressed to spar, no gloves, no gi, no belt, knotted tight around her waist. To the crowd, she looked like a bystander, maybe someone's mother who had wandered too close to the wrong mat. That was how Daniel the black belt wanted them to see her. Small, out of place, an intruder in his domain. But Maya Cole was never out of place. She was the reason this gym existed at all. Her company had quietly financed the chain months ago, but she hadn't told anyone who she was when she walked in today. She didn't need to. Power doesn't always wear a name tag. The insult, though it wasn't new. Her mind flickered back to her first boxing class at 17. She remembered the trainer who had laughed, telling her to stick to the treadmill because the heavy bag wasn't for girls. She remembered the smirk on his face, the sound of the gloves hitting the floor as she walked out. That moment had stayed with her, and so did the vow she made. Silence first, proof later. Now, decades later, she stood in another gym, with another man mistaking silence for weakness. Daniel circled like a predator, his eyes glinting with arrogance. "What's the matter?" he called, his voice echoing off the walls. "Scared? Afraid the crowd will see how fragile you really are?" A ripple of laughter spread, uneasy but present. A few trainees shook their heads, shifting their weight, embarrassed but silent. Maya adjusted her sleeve, steady, unbothered. Inside, she replayed the lesson she'd learned young. Not every attack deserves a counter. Some fights end before they begin because the ground they stand on was never theirs. She breathed in slowly, letting the noise wash over her. Each insult, each chuckle, each sidelong glance only confirmed what she already knew. They had no idea who she was. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was a calculation. From the far corner, a young woman paused mid-sit-up, frowning at the scene. She whispered to her partner, "She's not folding, she's waiting." Waiting. That word carried across the gym, unspoken but felt. A seed of doubt planted itself among the crowd, and Maya, still steady at the edge of the mat, knew exactly when that seed would bloom. Daniel slapped his palms together, the sound sharp as a whip. "Come on, everyone, let's give her some encouragement." His voice boomed across the gym, bouncing off mirrors and punching bags. Heads turned. People who had been focused on their own drills stopped. Jump ropes stilled. A few guys at the bench press chuckled, whispering loud enough for it to spread. "Don't break a nail in there. She won't last one punch. This'll be quick." The laughter grew not roaring, but sharp enough to sting. And that was exactly what Daniel wanted. He thrived on spectacle. The bigger the crowd, the louder his swagger. Maya remained where she was, her arms relaxed at her sides. Her silence pressed against the noise like an invisible wall. She had endured this before at boardroom tables where men with louder voices tried to shrink her down, at conferences where her ideas were stolen, then applauded when repeated by someone else. Always the same pattern: mock first, doubt second, dismiss last. But dismissal has a cost, and Daniel was about to pay it. "Step in here," Daniel barked, pacing the mat, his black belt trailing behind him. "I'll even fight with one hand behind my back. You can have the first swing. Make it fair." He grinned at the crowd, feeding off their smirks. "You'll see, strength is earned, and some people just don't have it." His eyes cut back to Maya, cold and taunting. "Some people should stay in the stands where they belong." The air shifted. The laughter wasn't unanimous anymore. Some glanced at Maya with uncertainty, their smiles faltering. The calm in her face didn't look like fear. It looked like something else. From the corner, a trainer muttered, "Careful, she hasn't moved yet." Daniel ignored it. He stomped his heel against the mat, demanding attention. "Tick-tock, lady. This is your last chance to prove you're not all talk. Or do you need me to carry you in here myself?" The taunt landed heavy. The crowd leaned forward, caught between curiosity and cruelty. Phones appeared in hands, some pretending to check messages, others already filming in secret. Maya inhaled slowly, her gaze locked on Daniel. She didn't speak. She didn't move. The stillness stretched, taut as a bowstring. Daniel laughed, mistaking quiet for surrender. "See? Nothing. Empty. Just another spectator who thought she could hang with real fighters." But the stillness wasn't surrender. It was preparation. And though the gym hadn't realized it yet, the ground was already tilting. The gym had fallen into an uneasy rhythm. Daniel strutted across the mat, tossing words like punches, waiting for laughter to follow. But the echoes didn't carry as strongly as before. Maya stood steady, her arms loose, her gaze locked on him, not blinking, not breaking. Her stillness spread like a pressure in the room, pulling the noise into silence. Daniel clapped his hands again, louder this time, forcing attention. "What's wrong? Did the cat steal your courage? Step in or admit you don't belong here." The words cracked through the air, but they didn't land the same. A few people exchanged looks. The woman at the water station set her bottle down, shaking her head. A young man near the heavy bag frowned, muttering under his breath, "He's pushing too far." But Daniel mistook hesitation for weakness. He laughed louder, pacing circles on the mat. "See, this is what happens when someone pretends, they freeze, they fold, they get exposed." Maya didn't flinch. She adjusted the cuff of her jacket, slow and precise, as though time itself bent to her rhythm. Her face remained unreadable, no anger, no fear, no embarrassment, and that composure unsettled the crowd more than his shouting. The young trainer from the corner leaned toward his partner. "Look at her," he whispered. "She's not scared. She's measuring." Measuring. The word lingered, subtle as smoke. Daniel, oblivious, threw another jab with his voice. "Don't worry, sweetheart. You can still sign up for cardio classes. Leave the fighting to the real ones." This time, only a thin ripple of laughter followed. Even those who smirked glanced quickly at Maya afterward, uneasy with how she remained untouched by every insult. Silence doesn't need volume. It has gravity. And the longer she held it, the heavier it pressed. Daniel's grin twitched. He stomped his foot on the mat again, desperate to shake the stillness. "Say something," he demanded. Anything! Prove you're not just a coward in gym clothes. Maya's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The gesture was enough to hold the room captive. The law of attention had shifted. Daniel was loud, but people were watching her. And though she hadn't moved an inch, everyone felt it. She wasn't resisting. She was waiting. A hush settled over the gym, the kind that vibrates more than it quiets. The sound of weights clanging in the far corner felt distant now, drowned beneath the tension curling between Daniel and the woman he mocked. Maya's silence stretched on, unbroken, her eyes steady, her breathing measured. Every insult Daniel hurled seemed to dissolve before reaching her, like water striking stone. At the back of the room, a young man shifted uneasily on the bench. He pulled his phone from his pocket, thumb hesitating over the camera app. He glanced around, checking if anyone else noticed. His friend whispered, "Don't. They'll kick you out." But the young man shook his head. "No, this needs to be seen." His voice was low, almost trembling, not from fear but from conviction. Across the mats, a woman refilling her water bottle leaned toward her partner. "She hasn't said a word, and she's already stronger than him," she murmured. Her partner nodded slowly, eyes fixed on Maya. Daniel, unaware of the shift, threw his arms wide as if commanding an audience. "See how easy this is? Silence is surrender. She won't even step onto the mat." He laughed, but the sound didn't land. It scraped the room instead. The trainer in the corner lowered his gloves, shaking his head. "It's not surrender," he muttered. "It's control." His student blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in his tone. Phones flickered now, one, then another. Not everyone was bold enough to hold them high, but angles of glowing screens betrayed the truth. People were recording, quietly, cautiously, but recording nonetheless. Daniel's smirk faltered. He saw the lights, the subtle tilt of heads, the crowd's shifting weight. "Go ahead," he barked. "Film it. Let the world see her back down." But even as he claimed the narrative, it was slipping from his hands. The more he shouted, the more desperate he looked. And the more she stood still, the more the gym leaned toward her. Maya adjusted the strap of her jacket, her motion deliberate, her silence unshaken. She didn't need to stop the recordings. She didn't need to invite them either. The truth was already writing itself in the room. Power doesn't always speak first. A whisper threaded through the crowd like a current. "She's not breaking." Then another. "He's digging his own grave." For the first time, Daniel's eyes flickered with unease. And Maya, still motionless at the edge of the mat, knew the tide had turned. Daniel's grin stretched too wide, desperate, cracking at the edges. He yanked at the Velcro straps of his gloves, tearing them off with a violent rip. The sound jolted the room. He flung one glove to the floor, then the other, letting them slap against the mat with deliberate contempt. "You see this?" he barked, voice booming. "I don't even need these. She's not worth gloves." A thin murmur rippled through the gym. Some laughed weakly, but others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting back to Maya, who stood motionless still, her expression unreadable. Daniel paced closer to the edge of the mat, towel draped over his shoulder. He ripped it free and hurled it at her feet. The fabric fell limp across the floor, but the gesture carried the sting of humiliation. "Pick it up," he sneered. "At least be useful. That's about all you can handle in here." A few gasps escaped the crowd. One woman shook her head sharply, muttering, "That's too far." The young man filming tightened his grip on his phone, his jaw set. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with," he whispered. His friend nodded, eyes locked on Maya. Daniel pressed forward, arms flung wide as though he were on stage. "This is what happens when you pretend to belong somewhere you don't. You get exposed. You get put back in your place." He stomped his foot against the mat, the sound echoing, sharp, commanding. But the crowd didn't roar with him. The silence stretched instead, thick and suffocating. Maya's eyes lowered briefly to the towel at her feet. Then she looked back at him, her gaze calm, steady, immovable. That look unsettled him more than any punch could have. Desperation flickered in his movements now. He grabbed a folder of gym waivers from the front desk, flipping through the papers with exaggerated mockery. "Maybe I should make you sign one before you embarrass yourself. Liability, right?" He crumpled a sheet in his hand and tossed it into the air, the paper floating down between them. The clerk at the counter froze, unsure whether to intervene. The law student in the gallery scribbled furiously, as though documenting every detail. Daniel's voice cracked with manic energy. Come on, say something. Show them you're not just a statue in leggings. But the only response was stillness. Maya didn't bend to pick up the towel. She didn't reach for the paper drifting near her shoes. She didn't speak. And that silence, again, pressed harder than his rage. The gym could feel it now. The power wasn't in his volume. It was in her refusal to yield. Daniel's breath came heavier now, not from exertion but from the weight of his own showmanship. Sweat slicked his temples as he stalked closer to the edge of the mat, fingers stabbing the air toward Maya. "You think silence makes you strong?" he barked. "No, it makes you weak. It makes you prey." He took another step, his bare feet slapping against the mat. The towel he had thrown lay limp between them, a symbol of his desperation more than her defeat. Maya didn't move. She met his glare with steady eyes, her chest rising and falling in rhythm, unshaken. The crowd shifted uneasily. The young man with the phone whispered, "He's losing it." His camera caught every gesture, every insult, every tremor in Daniel's bravado. Near the weights, a woman crossed her arms. "She's not weak," she said flatly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Others nearby nodded. The tide was turning, slow but certain. Daniel sensed it too. His voice rose, desperate to reclaim ground. "Fine. If you won't step in, I'll bring the fight to you." He lunged forward, stopping just shy of the boundary line, his toes curling over the edge of the mat. The move was calculated theater, close enough to intimidate, not close enough to draw an official reprimand. The clerk behind the counter tensed, ready to intervene but hesitant. This was no longer just a sparring challenge. It was a spectacle unraveling. Maya adjusted the strap of her jacket, the same unhurried motion as before. But this time, her head tilted slightly, her gaze narrowing not in anger, but in assessment. That single gesture pulled the oxygen from the room. The trainer in the corner lowered his voice to his student. "That's not the look of someone cornered. That's the look of someone who knows exactly what comes next." Daniel smirked, misreading it as hesitation. "Yeah, that's right. You know what's coming. And when I'm done, this whole gym will know who's real and who's just pretending." But the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Murmurs spread, threads of doubt weaving through the onlookers. Maya remained still, but in her stillness was a signal. The waiting was over. And though Daniel couldn't see it yet, the room could feel it. The storm he had begged for was about to answer. The mat was Daniel's stage, but the gym was no longer his audience. Every eye had shifted to the woman he mocked, the one who hadn't moved until now. Maya stepped forward, just one step, slow, deliberate. The sound of her shoe against the polished floor was barely audible, yet it cut through the room like a bell. The chatter stopped, the phones lifted higher. Even Daniel's grin froze, uncertain. She bent down, not to pick up the towel he had thrown at her, but to move it aside with the edge of her shoe. Then, without breaking eye contact, she unzipped her jacket and slipped it off, folding it neatly over her arm. Beneath it, she wore a fitted black training top, her posture lengthened, her shoulders settling with ease like someone returning to a space they already knew. A ripple moved through the crowd. "She's stepping in," someone whispered. "No," the trainer corrected softly. "She's taking over." Maya placed her jacket on the bench with meticulous care. Then she stepped onto the mat, her foot pressed against its surface, grounding her in the space Daniel had claimed as his own. The gym fell into complete silence. Even the sound of weights clanging in the far corner had stopped. Daniel laughed, but the laugh was tight, edged with nerves. "Finally, took you long enough. I'll make this quick." Maya didn't respond. She rolled her shoulders once, loosening them with the ease of routine, not performance. Her eyes locked onto his not aggressive, not fearful, but precise. The young man recording whispered into his mic, almost reverent, "This isn't hesitation, this is control." Daniel tried to regain his stage. He bounced on his heels, clapping his hands. "All right, sweetheart, let's show them what happens when you step out of your lane." But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. They leaned toward Maya, breath caught, waiting. She raised her hands, not in a sloppy guard, but in a stance that spoke volumes, balanced, centered, professional. Those who knew enough recognized it immediately. "She's trained," someone gasped. The truth flickered across Daniel's face, too quick for him to hide, a flash of doubt. Maya's first step had already shifted the fight. Not a punch, not a kick, just presence. And presence was enough to silence the whole gym. Daniel circled her like a predator, trying to shake off the flicker of doubt. He raised his fists, bouncing on the balls of his feet, his voice loud enough to keep the crowd tethered to him. "Don't freeze up now," he taunted. "Everyone's watching." Maya didn't blink. She shifted her weight, settling into her stance with a calm precision that betrayed years of practice. Her hands rose not timidly, not defensively, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Daniel lunged, a quick feint meant to rattle her. But Maya didn't flinch. She pivoted smoothly, her footwork clean, letting his momentum pass her by. The move was small, almost casual, but the effect was seismic. Gasps rippled through the gym. Daniel gritted his teeth, embarrassed. He swung again, this time faster, a jab aimed at her shoulder. Maya slipped it with ease, her head tilting just enough, her counter coming in the form of a simple tap to his wrist, redirecting his punch into empty air. The crowd erupted, not in laughter but in shock. Phones lifted higher, trainers leaned forward, whispers surged. "She's trained. That's not luck. She knows exactly what she's doing." Daniel's smirk cracked. He stepped back, sweat beading on his forehead. Maya exhaled once, controlled, unbothered. She lowered her hand slightly, speaking for the first time since the challenge began. Her voice was calm, steady, carrying through the silence. "You wanted the crowd to see?" She tilted her head. "Let them." Daniel blinked, momentarily thrown. "What are you talking about?" Maya took one step closer, her eyes locked on his. "This isn't your stage, Daniel. This gym, this chain, you don't own it. You don't run it." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I do. I want." The revelation detonated in the room. The murmurs exploded into gasps, a chorus of disbelief and awe. The young man filming nearly dropped his phone. "She's the owner?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Daniel staggered back, his face blanching. "What?" Maya's tone sharpened, though it never rose. "You mocked me in front of people who looked to you for leadership. You turned this mat into a stage for humiliation. But you forgot whose roof you're standing under." The trainer in the corner whispered, almost to himself. "She's the CEO." Maya lowered her guard completely, standing tall, her presence alone enough to command the room. "You called me weak in a gym I built. You tried to erase me in a space that exists because of me." Her eyes swept across the crowd, catching every stare, every camera. And now everyone knows the truth. Daniel's fists dropped to his sides, the fight drained from him. The room, once his arena, now belonged entirely to her. The air inside the gym shifted like a storm breaking. Where laughter had filled the space minutes earlier, now there was only the hush of recognition, the heavy silence that follows revelation. "She's the CEO?" someone whispered. "I thought she was just visiting." No wonder she didn't flinch. The murmurs threaded together, swelling louder than Daniel's voice had ever carried. The weight of the room had moved, and it pressed on him now, not her. Daniel's chest heaved, his fists half raised, but the posture no longer read as power. It read as desperation. He glanced around for support, searching the crowd that had once cheered his swagger. Their eyes avoided his now, shifting back to Maya, steady and composed. The young man filming shook his head, whispering into his phone. He asked for a fight, and she gave him truth. At the water station, the woman who had frowned earlier folded her arms. "Respect doesn't come from shouting," she said quietly. "It comes from standing." Her partner nodded, gaze fixed on Maya. Even the trainers, men who had once slapped Daniel on the back after sparring sessions, now exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered, "We work under her name. Every check, every piece of gear hers." The law student in the gallery scribbled furiously, documenting each word as though history itself was unfolding on the mat. Daniel tried again, his voice cracking under the strain. This doesn't mean anything. A name on paper doesn't make you a fighter." He forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "You think owning a gym means you can stand here?" But the crowd didn't follow him. The echo of his words fell flat. Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. Standing tall in the center of the mat, jacket folded neatly on the bench behind her, she radiated a stillness more powerful than any punch. Her eyes met Daniel's, unyielding. "You wanted the crowd," she said softly, but the room carried her voice. "Now they see." The words rippled outward, heavier than his shouts, cutting sharper than his insults. Phones captured every angle. Trainers held their breath. The crowd, once leaning toward spectacle, now leaned toward justice. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his bravado draining. For the first time, he looked small, dwarfed, not by her fists, but by her presence. And Maya, without lifting a hand, had silenced the whole gym. The silence in the gym thickened until it was almost physical, pressing against the walls, against Daniel's chest. His fists lowered completely now, his arms hanging awkwardly at his sides. He looked around for support, but no one met his eyes. Every face pointed toward Maya. Maya inhaled slowly, her shoulders steady. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost conversational, but it cut sharper than any shout. "Daniel Cole," she said, each syllable deliberate. "Effective immediately, you are banned from this gym, and not just this one, every location under my company's name." Gasps echoed across the room. Daniel's head snapped back. "You can't." He stopped, realizing the futility of his protest. His face flushed crimson. "This isn't legal. You can't just erase me." Maya's gaze didn't waver. "You erased yourself. Every word, every gesture, every attempt to humiliate me in front of these people, it was your choice. And choices have consequences." The clerk at the front desk froze, wide-eyed, then began typing rapidly, pulling up Daniel's membership records. A trainer, arms folded, gave a slow nod, as though acknowledging an order he already knew was final. The young man filming whispered, "She just fired him from his own arena." Daniel stumbled forward, his voice cracking. "This place needs me. Without me, these people—" "No," Maya interrupted, her tone still level. "They don't need you. They need respect. They need safety. They need leadership that lifts, not crushes. And today, they saw what you offered." Her words landed like stone, undeniable. The woman at the water station clapped once, quietly. Then another joined. Within seconds, the sound grew not applause of spectacle, but recognition, affirmation. Daniel turned in a circle, desperate, looking for a single face of support. None came. Maya lifted her chin, her voice final. "Your clearance is revoked. Your key card is disabled. When you leave today, you don't come back." The clerk at the desk raised her head, voice steady. "Confirmed." The weight of the words hit Daniel harder than any strike. His arms dropped completely, his body slumping under the truth. And Maya, without raising her voice, without throwing a single punch, had delivered the knockout. Daniel stood stranded in the center of the mat, his body slouched, his face pale. The crowd no longer saw a black belt. They saw a man stripped of authority, undone by his own arrogance. Around him, whispers swelled into certainty. The room belonged to her now. Maya straightened, collected her jacket from the bench, and folded it neatly over her arm. She didn't rush. Every movement was precise, intentional, like a ritual. She turned once not to Daniel but to the crowd faces that had witnessed insult turn to revelation. Her eyes swept across them, steady, unflinching. When she spoke, her words carried not because she shouted, but because the room leaned in to hear them. "You called me weak. You called me out of place. But power doesn't need to prove itself with noise. Power builds, power endures, and power decides who stays in the ring." Oh. The sentence hung in the air like a final bell. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, slowly, the trainers nodded. The woman at the water station whispered, "That's leadership." The young man filming lowered his phone, awe softening his expression. Even the clerk at the desk, still frozen behind her computer, exhaled as though she had been holding her breath for the entire confrontation. Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came. For once, silence belonged to him, not her. Maya slipped her jacket back on, her movements smooth, dignified. With her folio tucked under one arm, she walked toward the exit. Each step echoed against the polished floor, calm and steady, cutting through the heavy quiet. The double doors swung open, and daylight poured in. Her silhouette framed in that glow was the last image the crowd would remember. A woman who had refused humiliation, who had built her response on stillness until the moment she chose to move. As the doors closed behind her, the gym erupted not in chaos, but in hushed reverence. People whispered to one another, not about Daniel's insults, but about Maya's silence, her revelation, her authority. Daniel sank onto the mat, smaller than he had ever looked. Around him, the walls of the gym no longer echoed his voice. They carried hers. And with that, the story was finished, not with fists, not with fury, but with dignity. Maya had entered quietly. She left with everything.